Hey guys, welcome back. It's Cult of Film. I'm back with Truman, and this week we are reviewing an actual theater release that we saw with a friend of ours last week, Late Night with the Devil, which was directed by Colin Calms. Is it Calms? Colin
But
Cairns.
there,
Cairns. Sorry, Colin
there.
Cairns and Cameron Cairns. Can you tell I haven't? Yeah, my eyes don't work because I haven't had my morning coffee. So. Um, Also written and directed by the duo. This
And
was produced by or co-produced by Shudder, the great horror streamer, and IFC Films, and we love them too. Yeah, this was this was a really interesting film. This has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was fun to go with the fellas actually into the theater to watch the movie. So basically, breakdown: it's a supernatural horror film, and the plot. It basically revolves around a 1970s talk show host, fictional, of course, who named Jack Delroy, who does a show called Night Owls with Jack Delroy. He's of course competing with the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and so that's sort of the setup. And we learn over time that Jack, Mr. Delroy, had made regular visits to a place called the Grove, which actually is a place that exists, which is an elite California camp for rich and powerful men. And sometime later, his wife Madeline contracted terminal lung cancer despite being a non-smoker, and her death had a major effect on Jack and the show. Jack ultimately makes a comeback, and let's say before she died, an episode of his wife telling her cancer story doesn't really boost ratings for the show uh, uh, at peak, and Jack decides to basically engage in some occult themed episodes to try to win back his ratings and his former glory. And that's when all the fun starts. So, yeah, Mr. Truman, what did you think about Late Night with the Devil?
I think that there's a lot of cool elements to this movie. One of the big things is that they put a lot of painstaking effort into the art direction and the cinematography
Mm-hmm.
that helps to sort of emulate that feeling of the 1970s Johnny Carson-esque talk show. And so like that the art direction with the sets and the costumes especially, it really captures the feeling of that era. David Desmalkian is in the lead. We love to see Desmalkian in anything, for
Yes.
people who are not familiar with that name.
David
So,
Dismalkian, who is he plays Jack Delroy, our lead.
mhm. And he is known for playing, relatively small but very cool bit parts. He's in a lot of Denis Villeneuve's movies.
Yeah.
Um, he's been in several Christopher Nolan movies. He was like the Polka Dot Man in the Suicide Squad films, and he's always great. He is one of those people. There's a number of not necessarily actors um, working today, but the people who are known for playing relatively small bit parts. Who, as soon as you see them, you go like, "Oh my god!" Like
Right.
he's. I'm like now I'm pumped to see him. That's something that was fairly common. In like the 50s and 60s, there were many great bit part actors who would just kind of show up for a scene or two and who you would get pumped to see.
Right.
And that's something that we
Yeah,
have.
we really had those. We had those folks through the '70s, the '80s. I think even through part of the '90s, and it's nice to see, that we still have them. We don't have nearly as many, but I agree with you, for sure. It's nice to see somebody who, like you said, it tends to be supporting, tends to be in the background, really get a chance to show us what he's capable of, and yeah, it's so cool to see. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, like good example. Another good example is like Steve McKinley Henderson, who he was in Dune and he was in Beau is Afraid.
Hmm.
Um, what I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I'm blanking off the top of my head. He was in Zodiac. John Carroll Lynch. He was in.
Oh, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, anytime you see John Carroll Lynch, it's a great time too. But anyhow, Des Malkian is, I think, at that kind of level as well, where he is weirdly enough, despite not having a lot of big credits to his name, for me at least, and for many people that I've seen online, it is kind of a box office draw, which is sort of unusual. But again, I think that's is very cool, and so it's very cool seeing him in the lead role in this film as well. And so that, I mean, for me personally, that was literally, for me, that was why I wanted to see the movie. I heard some good buzz about this, and I saw, oh, that's Malkian's in the lead.
Well, I agree. I had seen the trailer and I immediately recognized him. And I really like the fact that still seems to be some corners of this industry in which somebody who is a trained, skilled actor, who is not textbook hot, who is just really good, will get work beyond just casual supports. And I don't say just casual support, because supporting work is incredibly important. But it is nice to see that somebody out there somewhere isn't just crunching numbers, isn't just doing the market research that, okay, yeah, we basically need a fitness model who can act, and that's who we're casting. It's like, no, we actually have a whole bunch of people out there with tremendous skill, and they deserve a chance to do these things too. So it was, I really needed to support this movie on a variety of fronts, and that was probably the biggest reason. That they could have put Adam Driver in this. They could have put a lot of guys that have a particular look but are of a particular level, and they like, no, we're just going to go with just kind of a character actor who's really, really, really damn good. That was nice.
Let me see. There's more things that I liked about the movie, but I'd like to hear some of your thoughts before we get into that, because I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah. I really liked one of the things that before we get into a whole lot. One of the things that really struck me was how I think they had limited sets for this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like they probably, I feel like they, and I don't mean that as, and that to me, that's not a negative at all. One of the pluses for me, as someone who's an aspiring filmmaker, someone who's been screenwriting for years, was it seemed that even if they had just one big stage, they could have built every single scene that was in this movie on that stage. And obviously, on a very practical level, that minimizes your budget. But as far as I'm concerned, they pulled it off. It, to me, was a believable, compelling, interesting, fun watch. The pacing of it, I really enjoyed. At no point did I ever get bored. The entire cast is stacked with these incredible, fun, truly just impeccable character actors. Every single, the supporting characters, everyone, there was no weak link. It was I feel a very, very strong script, and they really nailed it with, I think, the cast. They nailed, like you said, the look and feel of the late 70s. I believe it takes place in 1977.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I feel like there's other productions that will do movies set in the 70s, and it's clearly people who look contemporary but in 70s clothes. And I kind of felt like they did a very good job, even with casting people that just had a few lines in the studio audience of the movie. They felt genuine to the time. So all around, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm glad that it got a theatrical release, because I've seen, I'm a Shutterhead. I absolutely love Shutter.com. I've been subscribing since 2020. I remember when I first subscribed, it was while we were in lockdowns, and I was with family in Northern California, and I subscribed, and I think I watched 6 movies in a day. Like it was a treasure trove. It is a treasure trove. And I've seen so many great movies on Shutter, and I'm like, man, that should have got a theatrical release. There's so much good stuff on Shutter. I can't recommend people subscribe to Shutter enough. And then Late Night with the Devil, when I first saw the trailer for it, I'm like, oh, this will be great. I'll add this to my queue and I'll watch it. And then I'm like, oh wait, this is getting a theatrical release. So the fact that somebody out there thought enough of it to give it even a limited theatrical release, I thought was really, really great because, again, with a lot of these streamers, and certainly with niche streamers, you don't usually get that. And it
Yeah.
was really, really well received. Again, 97% Rotten Tomatoes. The fact that it is a completely original script, original production. It's not doesn't it's not any existing IP. It's not a part of any franchise. It is stacked with capable actors. And again, I didn't know anything about the Cairns, these fellas that wrote and directed it, really until this movie. And again, for me, the great production, great movie, worth your time, but also happens to be folks that are not household names, are not existing names. And it's nice to see not only that get through in terms of, they made this great movie. Not only did they get onto the streamer that suits them, but they got a theatrical release. And what do you know? Huge hit. I wish that Hollywood at large would be willing to take more chances, like Late Night with the Devil.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I agree with, and with the rest of it, I agree with, I think, almost everything. There are a handful of things about the movie that I was not as crazy about. I think the one of the big things for me was specifically the character of the skeptic within the story of the film. They are trying to conduct like seances and mind readings, and these kind of like sort of cheesy 1970s things that could feasibly be on late night TV. And then
Sure.
they bring in this kind of James Randi-esque character who comes in and he debunks everything, and he shows um, that everything is grounded in reality and science, and people
Mhm.
who believe in the supernatural are just a bunch of yokels that are easily tricked. And for me, I'm not quite sure why, but I think his performance, I think, came across as a little exaggerated. He plays the part of this kind of antagonistic skeptic, and I think he just feels like very, very pompous in the way that he speaks and talks, and in this kind of like exaggerated, you know, kind of dickhead way.
I thought that was on purpose, though. He was supposed to be the guy who, he wasn't that his character was pompous. So,
Yeah,
I don't know.
sure.
It didn't take me out. I thought that that's what he was supposed to be, because then later when things really start to go haywire, it was sort of fun to see his reaction. I don't know.
Yeah, I
So
agree. And that's a big part of it too. But I think for me personally, it felt a little bit. Yeah, I feel. Yeah, it felt a little one note in the sense that the way that the film is structured is something will happen, and then everyone will be shocked momentarily, and then he'll step in, and then he'll say like, oh well, this is ridiculous. And ultimately, like you said, I agree, it is fun seeing the ultimate, I guess, comeuppance that comes from
right.
that. But even then, that I think that back and forth where like something crazy happens, Jack Delroy is shocked and credulous, and then a skeptic comes in and is very smug about things. Um, I, I understand that the purpose of the character is to be this kind of like little push of antagonism as the story progresses. Um, but I think for me, especially if you see characters like James Randi, who he's inspired by
Right.
very clearly, they don't come off as necessarily smug.
Right.
I think there is a certain like haughtiness to them where they're like, oh yeah, like I know what's really up and I'm going to teach you. But it's more they more kind of have the feeling of like a professor, as a
Sure.
who's
Sure.
like there to teach, as opposed to someone who is kind of like explicitly that much of a jerk. And again, that obviously, like you said, that's a conscious decision. But for me, I think
Mhm.
that, and this kind of ties into a larger thing that I guess the what I would say is my biggest issue with the film is that despite the aesthetics of the 1970s being captured very well and very painstakingly, again, the sets, the costumes, the cinematography, all of that lends itself to feeling like, the way old Johnny Carson tapes feel.
Sure.
I think there's something about it. Again, it's a little tough for me to put my finger on, but there's something about it that doesn't quite. It feels like a movie about a late night talk show as opposed to a late night talk show. You know what I mean? I think it's my experience, my inexperience with late night TV as well, because I don't really watch a lot of it, but I view it in this very specific way as something that is very, very like scripted in a way, and is very like kind of clean and sanitized and corporate, where they have to keep the sponsors happy and all these
Sure.
things. And obviously, the film does touch on that. But I think the way that people behave, for me, I never really got the sense that, oh, this is, you know, Jack, to me, Jack Delroy never felt like a Jimmy Fallon character, the kind of person who is like trying to keep up that facade of this happy-go-lucky, charming guy who laughs at everything and everything is fun. I think initially, Jack's character, as we get into it, he's immediately like very doom and gloom. He's talking about his dead wife. He's talking about Satan and all of these other things. And in watching it, something, just that specific element of the character made me feel like, oh, okay, this is a movie, which is not, not a bad thing. But in watching the movie, I feel like it's not always fair to criticize a movie on grounds of what you would have liked it to have been. Clearly this is
Hmm.
trying to be a movie about a talk show. Um, but there is a part of me that thinks that it's kind of fair to bring this up in the sense that the movie, it doesn't commit to like the full found footage thing, and I think that would have been the most interesting version of this movie, where it is presented totally straight, like, these are like, we uncovered these tapes. We
Hmm.
don't know what it was, in the same vein as the Blair Witch, or if you're familiar with them, the works of Alan Resnick, who did like some stuff for Adult Swim, like This House Has People in It, or unedited footage of a bear. And those things, I think, really, really stand out to me because they are able to sell sort of the alternate reality of, hey, we just found this and like we have no idea what it is, especially the Adult Swim things, where they were designed for you to just sort of stumble across them on the internet and have no idea of what is going to be going in. And the Blair Witch Project obviously commits to that. And again, I don't think it would necessarily be fair to have that as a criticism of the film, except for the fact that it kind of does gesture at it very vaguely, where it says like, oh, in the beginning of the movie, it says, oh, these are the lost, recovered tapes of that fateful taping where it all went crazy.
I
Uh,
see what you mean. Okay.
you know what I mean? And to
Yeah.
me, it feels like it says, okay, we're doing this, and then we're into the real part of the movie. There's certain things at the end where it plays with that a little bit too.
Sure.
And so again, like obviously this is like a conscious decision, and I think it ultimately it would have been difficult to it would have definitely been difficult to, I don't know, sell any element of that as like a wide release feature film, like with Des Malkin and other recognizable people in it. But all that being said, I was left kind of thinking like, wow, the shorter version of this that does play it totally straight, where we never leave the perspective of the cameras,
Hmm.
and it literally is just, it is presented to us like a 50-minute or 45-minute segment of reality TV. I think, oh, that could have been very cool. Again, in the same vein as a lot of Alan Resnick stuff, where you see it and you're watching and you go, oh, this feels real. Um, you know, which again, you know, the great art direction would have lent itself to. And you watch and you go, oh, this feels real, and like that is what makes it feel very surreal and unsettling. And so again, I don't know how necessarily, you know, I don't like to critique films um, at this sort of in this way of like, oh, I think it could have been this, it should have been that. You know, I like to focus on what is. But
Yeah, I mean, I see your point on like the found footage angle. That would be an interesting approach. You know, you start with, you know, maybe you're talking with some, you know, former producer who's now much older and, you know, they're grizzled and they're smoking. Let me tell you what happened to Jack Delroy. Da, da, da. And, you know, and
yeah,
then we move into the, you know, the found footage or the old VHS tapes or the old whatever they were doing in the 70s. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think that would be a fun angle. I'm not bothered by the approach that they took. I really like that for the most part we were really on the show, in the show the whole time, you know, seeing what they're doing on camera, and then when they go to the break and you know the pressures that they're dealing with, you know, we got to keep the sponsors happy, or wow, that thing that just happened, wow, right, it's off the charts. Network is calling us, asking us, wow, how did you do that? All those things. I don't have a problem with Delroy's character being more sanguine and more somber in light of because of where we're meeting him. We're meeting him really at the after the loss of his wife. We're
yeah,
meeting him at a time where his ratings just are in the tank. That it really is make or break for this guy. You know, he's lost so much, and yeah, doesn't bother me too much. And sort of him then sort of pivoting towards this occult, spooky Halloween angle in an attempt to salvage his show because it's really make or break for this guy.
yeah,
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with it. It almost felt like the way it was filmed. It did kind of feel like I was in that TV studio with them the entire time. The fact
yeah.
that the
I would
only
agree.
footage we saw was of Bohemian Grove, or as they call it, the Grove.
Yeah,
You know, when we saw, you know, old like black and white footage of that didn't bother me. It gave me the background. Um, I liked the vagueness of the occult elements and how they were used in this film. I
yeah,
feel that there are some films or like you know what you call smaller horror franchises that again are fun that I enjoy that they end up explaining too much and we lose the mystery, and because we lose the mystery it ceases to be as much fun, and this film doesn't fall into that trap at all. we
right.
we see Bohemian Grove, we see a man who's kind of desperate, we see a guy who also just genuinely wants to do a great job. He wants to be a great TV host, he wants to be successful, um, and he has some real hits pitched his way, and he makes some decisions, and I don't know. I think it works, and I again the overall fact that this is for the most part indie produced, not like indie like we bootstrapped it and made it for $10,000. It had a budget of $10 million, but again, this was something that probably was never supposed to get a theatrical release. This was something that was probably going to just remain on the streamer, and you might have found it, you may not have found it. But I feel like this is the little independent horror film that could, even though it had a $10 million budget.
Yeah,
And it doesn't feel cheap. It feels really well crafted. It feels very, and again, I think what contributes to the ominous sort of back of your neck, you know, feel that I had the whole time was the fact that we never really leave that studio. Like I mean, there are flashbacks of Jack, you know,
yeah,
talking to his wife when she's ill, but um, you kind of feel like you can't get out, and I think that really helps contribute to the movie, the uneasiness, the anticipation, and then when wild stuff starts to happen, it's like, ooh, where are they going with this? And they don't fall for a lot of the um, again the occult themes that they deal with. I'm trying not to be too spoilerish. They really
yeah,
don't fall for those tropes either. I'm like, okay, but is this going to turn into The Exorcist? Is this going to turn into Paranormal Activity? No, it remains its own thing, and the way they use these these happenstances and these occurrences and these unexplained things. I think again, beautifully done, and I hope this movie continues to be successful, and I hope that these the Cairns brothers get their flowers, because
Yeah.
not only is it just a fun, good, smart horror film, but for all of us out here that are on the unknown indie side of things, we're all rooting for these guys. And again, well done, gentlemen, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly I would agree. It's the kind of film, I have certain qualms with it, but I think it is the type of movie that I enjoy supporting. Certainly, yeah, pretty fairly low budget. I don't know if was it a $10 million budget?
Yes,
Where?
I'm looking at it right here. 10.2, in fact. And it was a co-production. One of the things I noticed immediately as it was opening was one of the producers was from the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, which kind of
Yeah.
surprised me.
Hmm.
Muslim country. I'm like, oh, they're bankrolling horror films. I'm like, okay, that's cool. But it was
That
an
is
international co-production of Australia, United States, and United Arab Emirates. So, and it had its premiere at South by Southwest 10th of March of 2023, received positive reviews from critics, garnered praise for its performances, production designs, technical aspects, though it also received criticism for utilizing AI-generated art in 3 still images.
Yes, that's something I want to talk about too.
Yeah. That I was going to say, if you had put me to the wall and quote unquote find something to critique, again, I didn't want to, but it was something that I noticed was because there's some really, again, I worship at the altar of practical effects. I'm not against CG or AI use. They're tools, and depending on how you use them, it's all about the person using the tools. There were a couple of frames where they did use the AI for a few scenes. Again, I'll try to be vague about it. That I did kind of notice, not to the extent that it took me out of it, but it was something that I did notice, and I'm again, because it didn't take me out of the film, and it didn't hurt my enjoyment of the film. I was like, I can let this go because this movie has so much else going for it. But
Yeah.
I do see where, okay, I could see if they were going to criticize it, that may be the thing. But please go ahead.
Yeah, I actually felt that it kind of took me out of the movie initially. So I know AI's art is this very controversial thing. People have many very strongly held opinions about it. And if you are a person who works in a creative field,
Yeah.
there's obviously this sort of like kind of deeper existential fear
Oh yeah.
surrounding it. So I definitely understand the reasons that a lot of artists in particular absolutely hate the notion of AI generated images being used. And I think that's totally
And there's
justified.
there's a lot to be concerned about there. One of the
Yeah.
it's one the existential threat of it to artists for sure. Was somebody made an interesting point the other day. I was reading something. I don't know if it was on one of the dailies or one of the magazines. That AI generated images and or stories, they sweep the entire internet, and that includes copyrighted and trademarked images.
Yes.
That could be a huge problem. Like I think it was Sarah Silverman who actually has filed a lawsuit that they said could take up to 5 years to, get addressed and settled if it ever is. But that is something that does need to be, not to get us deep in the weeds here, but if you're generating images and stories uh, based on everything that's available on the internet, that includes a whole bunch of stuff that's copyrighted and trademarked. How is that not an absolute infringement of those copyrights, those trademarks, intellectual property? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a really important question that needs to be addressed, and I think that whether people want to or not, and I don't mean us, the creative people, but it's something that at some point at a corporate level is going to have to be addressed, because if I create a movie using AI, How do I know that maybe end images or end scenes aren't garnered from something that's not mine? It's a big one.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, obviously, I think the general sentiment that people have, and one that I agree with, is that, there's going to be somewhere down the line, maybe in a year or two or five, there will be some big, like, landmark court case that really, hashes out what does an AI generated image actually mean legally as far as
Mhm.
rights go? How do you prove ownership of an AI generated image? And, people are
Yeah.
deciding what ethically does it mean, even if it's not legally someone whose work was used to train an AI model would have a legal right to anything made by an AI using their work. Ethically, is that right to do? Is that something people should object to seeing in their movies and being used as assets and all these things? And I obviously I'm mainly sympathetic towards the artists, the people that spend years and years and years becoming good at their craft and putting
Yes.
out work. Um, but that being said, I don't. When I heard the like controversy surrounding this movie, I thought, well, it's not like a huge part of it. They use it to make some title cards. They said,
Right.
as these "We'll be right back" cards in the '70s style. They used them for that, and I I thought, well, they changed them after the fact too. They just use it to like generate assets. So it's not awful. It's not like, oh, hey, make something in the style of this specific artist. And so, like you, I kind of view it as something that can be a useful tool. And
Sure.
so I was going into it just like whatever. I don't really care. I don't like to really focus on these type of controversies in watching a movie too. I like to again take it at kind of face value.
And at
But
this level, at this level of again a more indie, a more underdog production, I'm far more forgiving
yeah,
than if it
we're like
was if tomorrow the biggest movie franchises started AIing actors, and we can see it, and we see a character in there that looks remarkably like Henry Cavill, but it's not Henry Cavill. Like that type, that's pretty egregious type of stuff. So
yeah.
you're right. And down the line, this is all going to have to be addressed as the technology grows.
I would
But
say for me, like aesthetically, it was weird where I was okay with it kind of in an ethical sense, but
mhm,
I think aesthetically it stuck out to me as we were watching the movie because again, they spent so much time recreating the '70s with the sets and the costumes
mhm,
that
mhm.
the cards show up and you look at it and you go like wait, that's AI. It looks like an AI generated image. It has that kind of like weird melty look to it, and that to
Right.
me actually that did take me out because some of the end cards are not. They're like real hand drawn and they look
Mhm.
like regular art, but the AI stuff again, I think that was another thing that I looked at and thought like, oh, this is not actually the '70s despite all the
Right.
effort that has gone into capturing it. So it's one of
It
those
is.
things. I think it's the biggest, ultimately the biggest flaw of AI generated art is that it still looks kind of weird even if it's being used very sparingly. So,
Well, to kind of not to beat this horse to death, but to the
yeah.
point that you made, it's like, okay, you have your set designers, you have your
Mm.
your set decorators, you have your wardrobe people, you have all of these, you have people who drew some title cards. Why not just let them draw all of them? Like, again, I'm not trying to impugn. I do wonder, like, were some of the producers unhappy with some of them that they had to add maybe at the last minute? It's like, oh shit, what do we do? Okay, plug it in AI, just get it done. You know what I mean? Because again, like
Yeah.
you said, the level of dedication to the set design and just the overall aesthetics of this movie is fantastic. So I would have a hard time believing that they just all of a sudden decided to stop. Like, I'll bet there's a
Yeah.
story behind those intertitles that makes sense. So It's not like they were doing this for throughout the production. But yeah,
Yeah.
um, it's again, I'm sure we'll get into this more as things go on. But again, Late Night with the Devil, I think it's a really solid, fun night at the movies. It's a true popcorn movie. It's a great horror movie that does not fall into any of the tropey traps that horror can fall into. It is also one of the things I wanted to mention too is all of I almost loathe watching coming attractions now, the trailers before so many movies, because so little of it really appeals to me. However, most of the trailers before Late Night with the Devil were also other cool, fun, compelling looking horror films. Like there were 5 of them. There's like 2 of them starring Nicolas Cage that I'm really Arcadian and Longlegs with Nicolas Cage that I want to see. There's the one set in Switzerland. Can't remember the name of it, but yeah, there's a bunch of stuff.
Hunter Schafer.
What's it?
Cuckoo with Hunter Schafer.
Cuckoo, yes.
Yeah,
that looks like it's going to be a huge hit. That looks really good. But a bunch of Shudder IFC co-productions, a bunch of stuff distributed by Neon, and they do a lot of cool stuff.
Oh yeah.
But it was a quick reminder, again, with also watching Late Night with the Devil, this horror renaissance that we're in really shows no sign of slowing. It's a great time to be a fan of the horror genre. And even if you're not, like, I'm not a blood and gore guy. Like when you say horror, people think blood and guts. And I'm not about that per se, for as much as I love Lucio Fulci. It's not really his really elaborate kills that appeal to me. It's everything else. How beautifully shot his horror films are, just beautifully executed. And horror seems to be the most fertile genre creatively. You can watch something like Late Night with the Devil. You can turn around and watch The Invisible Man. You can turn around and watch Get Out. You can turn around and watch the original Night of the Living Dead, which I just reviewed with a friend. And all of it's horror, but it just feels like it's the most malleable, the genre with the most possibilities. And we've got so many cool, interesting, great creative stories made by cool, great, interesting people that when people tell me they don't like horror, I'm like, oh, you're really missing out. It's not just slasher films. And there's some great slashers out there. But yeah, that was something else that I noted before we watched the movie, was how much really cool stuff is coming out this year.
Yeah, no, it's looking good if you're a big horror fan or if you're a Shudder subscriber.
Yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches.
Mhm.
It really is. Well, let's head on over to the part of our show where we program a double feature. Something that we do here called a film. Those of you who aren't familiar, after we review a film, talk about it. If we were programming a double feature for Criterion Channel or for our fictional movie theater that we don't own yet, what do you think, Truman? And if you need time to think about it, if you were to program a double feature with Late Night with the Devil, is there anything that really you think would be a fun or a natural fit for something like this film?
Yeah, they're not feature films, but I would say definitely check out Alan Resnick's stuff. Again, they're primarily short films, but
Okay.
like this
I'm
house.
not familiar with him.
You should
These
definitely
adult film. Alan Resnick.
Adult Swim, not adult films.
What
But
did I
the
say?
adult films. No,
I meant Adult Swim.
yeah, but yeah,
Look, there
you
are
can watch
great
them
adult films
on
out there
YouTube.
too. Okay, never mind.
True. Yeah, no, fair enough. But yeah, I would. You can check out like This House Has People in It on YouTube. It's I think like 13, 15 minutes long, but it's really excellent. And again, it is in that same vein of presenting this sort of alternate reality where, hey, this is real, without being explicitly found footage. It says just kind of like this internet oddity again that you're meant to just kind of stumble on and have no idea what it is and just be shocked by, and kind of weirded out. And I think it does it very, very well. And so
Okay.
I would definitely encourage people to watch that, and other Alan Resnick stuff too. Again, it has more supernatural elements, but that's sort of the vibe that it would illustrate what I'm talking about, where I watch Late Night with the Devil and I think, oh, it would have been cool if it was this, which again is not necessarily fair, but that was how it felt coming off it. And then maybe like the Blair Witch Project, because that is the explicit, not the OG found footage movie, which is, as Cannibal Holocaust, but it is kind of the big one of the modern era that really launched a thousand imitators. But there's no, I don't, in my opinion, aside from maybe Cannibal Holocaust, there's no found footage movie, particularly no found footage movie that came after the Blair Witch Project, that really does what it does better, and especially for less. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. This is one where I really thought I would have something, and I'm struggling to think of something that would. I guess I guess I wouldn't recommend found footage, not because those movies aren't good, because I love Blair Witch. I really love Paranormal Activity franchise. I think it is one of the stronger overall franchises out there. I think the two strongest, like in terms of franchises that don't really have a low point, Scream. I've loved every single entry in it, and I thought Paranormal Activity was pretty strong too. If I were
No,
to pair, what's that?
no low points. I haven't seen all of them. I've heard some people be kind of harsh on
Yeah,
some of them.
well, I think this is something that I figured out because I've been talking a lot with friends. I don't know, for some reason the Aliens franchise has popped up a lot, and I really love the original trilogy. I don't feel as friendly towards the fourth one, Alien Resurrection. I felt like how
Yeah,
that thing wrapped itself up at the third point. I know why people don't like Alien 3 because it wasn't what people wanted, but it is the entry and the way it folded out, it made the most sense. Um, and again, I'm really heartbroken that Fox Disney did not greenlight Alien 5. That would have given us a pickup from Aliens. Like literally, that's where it picked up. The guy who did, I'm trying to remember his name. He did
one.
Priest, Priest, Precinct. Damn it, South African guy. He did Chappie. Hang on, let me tell you.
It's
Chappie,
Neil Blom.
2015. Neil Blomkamp. Neil Blomkamp spent 2 years basically putting together the follow up to Aliens. So basically, it would render Alien 3 sort of moot. I'm not sure how it would rewrite everything. I've seen all of the storyboarding for it. It looked incredible, and they decided against it. So Blomkamp decided after that, after working for 2 years and just having everything go away, he said he will never work on someone else's IP ever again. He will only work on his own stuff. So what could have been, but in terms of pairing with something like Late Night with the Devil, because it's such kind of a unique movie
It
that sort
is.
of doesn't really it doesn't really lend, like there's not a whole bunch of horror films about late night talk shows. Like I'm trying to think what else I would recommend, and I frankly would just tell the viewers subscribe to Shutter. No, I don't get paid. I should be, because I Shutter and Tubi should be writing me checks as much as I talk about them. I would go into I'd subscribe to Shutter, and I would find fun standalone films. There's actually two really fun standalone Nicolas Cage horror flicks on Shutter. One is called Prisoners of the Ghostland, and it's not a horror per se. It's sort of an apocalyptic fantasy film that was produced and directed in Japan. And if you like H.P. Lovecraft, the H.P. Lovecraft's Color Out of Space was another one that Cage did that's also on Shutter. And again, let's throw another one in, another uh, Nicolas Cage horror flick that I believe is also here on Shutter is Mandy. Again, if you just sort of a fun, trippy, unique, insular sort of experience. because that's really what Late Night with the Devil is. I would be surprised if we got a sequel from Late Night with the Devil. It feels very self-contained and sort of wraps itself up. So I would just say, subscribe to Shudder and just pick out one of these really fun, either Nicolas Cage horror flicks or just some standalone stuff. But I don't really have something that, and again, it's rare for me not to have something loaded and ready to go. But yeah, these standalone horror films on, or another great indie, a horror film, and it's not really horror. There's something called Blood Machines on Shudder, which was created and directed by Seth Ickerman, which is a hold-in name for two guys out of France who collaborate a lot with Carpenter Brut, the synth band out of France, which I worship at the altar of their stuff. Blood Machines. Right. It's split into three chapters, and I don't know if that was done for Shudder or if it was all one film in France. But it's a fun standalone, homegrown, fantastical, slightly horror element type of production. So yeah, my recommendation would be, this is a great Shudder co-production that was fun. Get in there, get into Shudder, and start looking around. It's an embarrassment of riches, just like Late Night with the Devil was.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah, guys. If you haven't already, please check it out. I think it might be exclusively streaming on Shudder now. So check it out. Subscribe to Shudder. And if there's anything like this, and again, maybe we're missing all of the other late night talk show horror films, please comment below, like, subscribe, tell us what we should check out. And yeah, man. This was your recommendation, wasn't it, Truman?
It was, yeah. I'm glad that we were able to get out and watch it in theaters. Again, I really like supporting these types of films. So
yeah. No, we need to go out for all of these neon IFC Shudder co-productions. We need to see all of these in the theaters because they're all worthy of theater productions. And all of you, get out there. Like, I know it's cool and it's fun to stream everything, but these people work really hard and put a lot of time and money into making their films, and they deserve to make it back, with then profits. But this was a great recommendation, man. We should do more Kino night field trips. We have for those of you that don't know, me and the fellas, other folks, we do things called Kino night, where we just, we kind of put on movies and watch them, and then Truman and I end up reviewing them. But this was fun. This was technically our first field trip out, and I think it's going to be the first of many. But this was a great recommendation, man. Great idea. You and Garrett were right. Let's get out there, and we need to do it more for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for watching. Again, like, subscribe, tell us how much we suck, help us with the algorithm, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
All right.